Welcome again to the second meeting for this meta dialogue group. This is a follow-up from our last meeting that was held back in April. We'll do introductions. I'll start with myself. My name's Hunter, as was kind of already mentioned. I worked with Dr. Cleese in the past, or as you guys know, June, at a community college program through the Civics Corps, which is how I found out about waging dialogue. And my passion is history, so this kind of ties into that and just people kind of work that waging dialogue does. And to me, it's just productive work that's piqued my interest. Also, as a note, this meeting will be recorded and put on YouTube. So that's a disclaimer, and I will hand it off to Matt.
So just gonna go through introductions because some people weren't here last time. So I'm Matt, and I've worked with Alice for a number of years, and uh, I've gone through this process with Helen over the past few years. It's been a while now, and we picked a few. We've tried to talk about a few topics. We talked about climate change at one point, and we talked about AI at one point, and we usually seem to end up talking about God, although I'm not religious, but we usually seem to end up talking about God anyway. Um, and she actually invited me to her church at one point, which was very nice. So yeah, had we built a very friendly relationship. Uh, Anybody want to go next?
Okay, I'll go. Just
Go ahead, Bobby. Go ahead,
Jinx.
Bobby.
Okay. All right, here we go. My name's Bob Powell. I publish a news program it was in northern Michigan called The Truth is Viral. I would consider my politics to be more libertarian than conservative. I'm for small government and taking personal responsibility, keep our own money in the United States instead of using it to foreign aid to fund foreign wars. And like, come on? The Pentagon and the CIA both were funding rebels that were fighting each other in Syria. Give me a break. Okay, we need some accountability in our government, and I'm working towards that. On January 6th, I recorded federal agents attacking the Capitol. And I know that they're federal agents because I've volunteered to come in and give the FBI an interview in all of my video from the 5th through the 7th, 7 times, only to be refused. When I've testified in 3 January 6 trials, the government fought at the first trial for 6 hours to keep me out of off the stand and my video out of evidence, and they failed. But then every time I made a salient point after that, they always object. Hey, Your Honor, this video is prejudicial to the government. Now, I know you can prejudice a jury, but I don't know how you can prejudice the government. Okay, so I watched through 3 trials, including the most recent of the praying grandma, Rebecca Lavrance, as the judges and the prosecution colluded with each other to hide exculpatory evidence that would prove that these people are innocent. I've seen it 3 times. I was sworn to Almighty God I raised my hand and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and I was not allowed to do so. Okay, so there's no justice, and I'm seeking it. That's my thing.
All right.
All right. My name is Trip. I call myself a peacemaker. I have been doing a lot of work with in like the spirituality as well as political world, is trying to heal division. The idea of like not really going into either camp of red versus blue, but seeing that we all have like nuanced ideas that kind of fit our own and that there's middle ground to be had. And I've been working with a few people. David, who was a partner of mine in this waging dialogue thing, we've done a couple of panel discussions where it's me, him, and a couple of other people talking about sustainability and solutions and, you know, like what it is that we can do going forward. And what we just kind of decided not to talk about like the areas that we disagree with in those panel discussions because it's not really the point of like the live. But it's been some really interesting talk about some of the stuff that he does in real life with this anti-apathy campaign and things like that. It's been really cool to like highlight and showcase. And we're all like my little group is just really interested on like healing division and finding ways to like move forward together. So that's me.
Well, I'll jump in here. My name is Troy. As I was saying before, I got into this through Junan. You guys call her June. Like I said, I've known her forever, so I call her Junan. That's actually her given name. She doesn't like it, but I still call her that. It's just a habit. I got into this because she had told me, like I was saying before, that there was a man who wanted to talk to somebody who was conservative, but Bob, I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. I think I'm kind of have a foot in both camps. Because I'm not so conservative that you have to have an open mind. I mean, well, we all grew up different. We're all different. We all have different experiences, etc. I don't like the hardcore conservative thing. It's just too rigid, I think. My whole thing with this is I enjoy doing this because we need to talk like this again. We've gotten away and the media has just, I don't know, the media does stuff just to sell things to make money. And I think that what they've done is I think they've stirred the pot so much and they know how to feed on our insecurities. And I think that's, I would like to think that it's not as bad out there as it seems. So that's about where I'm at. And hopefully I can contribute something to this. I don't watch the news. I scan the headlines. It's become just, I don't know. I don't know how many of you are old enough. I'm getting old. I'm 58. I remember when they had like the Weekly World News newspapers on newsstands and stuff, and it said like aliens land on the front lawn and, just weird things. And I'm thinking, okay, some of this is starting to mirror like real life now. This is getting weird. So it's like, I don't know how much of this stuff I'm buying. So hopefully I can contribute here something. Like I said, I don't go into depth on a lot of this stuff anymore. So.
Well, I'll go next. I'm Lynn, and Stan is my conversation partner, and he's not on. So I was at the last meeting online on Zoom, and I took really good notes last time, and I thought I had lost them. But lo and behold, I was cleaning off my desk yesterday, and I found them. And so the notes have Trip and Bobby and Helen on them, and of course other folks who aren't here today too, and Matt and Alice. So I read over the notes from last time, and it was so interesting to me to find out how people who seem to be kind of on different sides, like Bobby and Helen, seemed to find common ground last time, and how Trip kept saying, let's stay meta, don't get into the weeds, let's talk about the process. And so it was real interesting to read the notes over. So I'm 79, so Troy, I'm up there with you or beyond you, whatever, and in the last couple of years, especially, I've really devoted myself to the nonviolent movement and peace and justice work, and trying to learn all I can about that and participate. I live down in Nashville. We call Tennessee the tip of the spear for the conservative movement, apparently along with Texas and some other places. We've had some Proud Boys down here. We had the Goyim Defense League down here last week. We responded to it by meeting at Diane Nash Plaza, which is the old courthouse in Nashville. And of course, Diane Nash was a big freedom rider and peace worker back in the 60s. And we gathered, it was interesting. I wondered how we were going to react to, these Proud Boy groups and all that have been coming in here lately. They've been coming in quite often. And the theme of the meeting this week was we are Nashville and we do things the Nashville way. And so that was interesting. And then the other theme was, we have to greet with love rather than hate, like no hate, let's greet with love. So that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of where things are with me.
Lynn, I can relate. I went to school in Murfreesboro. I'm from
Did
Washington.
you?
Yeah, but I ended up down there going
Wow.
to MTSU.
Okay, my
where you're at.
my grandson's at TSU now, so
I love it down there.
it's a beautiful place. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice down there.
Yeah.
Well, I have to introduce myself now, I guess. Again, to those of you who have not met me, I'm Helen. And I have a global and a local view. I kind of telescope in and out when I look at situations and circumstances. And one of the things that I've been thinking about over the last few months since we last spoke is how there is a very small core of individuals who, for some ungodly reason, think that they have a better idea of how human beings are supposed to function than the human beings themselves. So, in other words, they've made themselves gods in their own eyes, and they think that they can dictate to us how we are supposed to conduct ourselves. I find it interesting that so few can influence so many. And what that says to me is very few of the people that they think that they can control are actually thinking and are up for their own autonomy. So I find that very interesting that there are so few people who actually are looking at things factually and then bringing those facts into, facts and reality are meshed. You can't have reality unless you have facts. And so I find it very interesting that individuals who see and experience the reality based on the facts can't seem to grasp the problem with allowing, say, for instance, the World Economic Forum to tell us as human beings as a whole what to do. I have a great aversion to any system like the Communist Party in China. I have a great aversion to that. And I love California, but they're trying to turn that into an extension of China. In fact, the whole West Coast is becoming that. And I used to live in California. I loved it. The weather, I loved it. But it's just becoming untenable now. And I don't understand how the good people of California could allow someone as goofy as Gavin Newsom to be the arbiter of laws that are so diabolical. I mean, I just look at it, it's just crazy. I know that Northern California is primarily very conservative or libertarian. In Southern California is a mixture, but it's the cities. It seems like the cities, there's a grip on the cities. And I just have all types of issues with how our cities and our states and even our people are being turned into something that we're not. It's not America. It's not the America I know. I grew up during Jim Crow, so having gone the whole process, and I love this country. My people have been here since I've traced us back to 1619. So, you know, I love this country. I have indigenous heritage. I have French. I'm sorry. My husband has French. I have Irish and Scottish and English, and you know, I actually have some Malaysian. I have a little bit of everything. So I am the world, and I just don't understand how anybody would want to destroy the system that we have that was working so well. And I came to the conclusion, I was talking to my husband this morning, and I was talking about, say for instance, food. The American people actually, as a whole, were some of the healthiest people on the planet because we had more food, better food. And all of a sudden, they're telling us milk isn't good for us. Eggs aren't good for us. Cheese isn't good for us. So we're going to eat this processed food that is beginning to deteriorate our health and our ability to, you know, I mean, we have, if you were born in my generation, you got bones like stone. I mean, you just, you know, your bones aren't brittle, you know, because I grew up on all chemical. I used to ride behind a truck that had the DDT spray for the mosquitoes. And we used to say, oh, okay, I can see. You know, I mean, there were things that we did as Americans that strengthened us. Remember when the Kennedy, President Kennedy had us do the physical education in every school? We were healthy. And now all of a sudden, anything we eat, they tell us is bad for us, but you can eat this and we'll give you a shot to help you because you need the shot to help you fight against what you should have had an immunity to if you had eaten the way that you've been eating. So I'm just looking at the whole. I look at how dangerous things have become for the identity of the nation. And, you know, that's how I look at it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm Alice. I'm the mastermind of this project. Psychiatrist, psychoanalyst. Very frustrated at my field's inability to transfer what we know about individual treatment onto the world stage. One example, if you're working with an individual, the first thing you do is build an alliance with them. You get to know them as a person. It doesn't matter if they're psychotic, if they're psychopathic, if they're, you know, schizophrenic, or if they're just, you know, having a hard time with something in their lives. You humanize the person that you're talking to, and then you can work from there. The way things are now, all we do is demonize each other. So part of this project is that, you know, what we're doing right now is just humanizing each other. This is how you got to be who you are, and this is who you are. From there, I think it's, I like to use bodily metaphors. You know, we have two sides for a reason. One side is dominant and leading. I happen to be right-handed, but, you know, they have to work together. They sort of have different jobs, but they work together. Two eyes that adapt to each other give you clarity and perspective and depth perception. Two eyes that argue that their landscape is the only truth, you're going to be blind and you're going to fall all over each other. That's where I think we are in our society. We're blind and we're tripping over each other. So what I hear now is just getting to know each other as human beings who come by our political perspectives authentically. Another piece of this, we just had a meeting this morning, Matt and I, with a group that was discussing mediation techniques in law. And it seems is similar, that the goal is to, how did she put it? It's the same thing. Humanize, recognition and empowerment was what she said. Recognize the other person and feel empowered to effect change that's going to work for both parties. And that's, I think, what we need to do. She said also that there needs to be a belief in the willingness and capacity of both parties to do it. I happen to be confident enough, naive enough, whatever it is, to feel that most people have the willingness and the capacity to do it. They just don't know how, and they don't have a space. Some people don't. We typically elect them, but most people in situations like this can do what we're doing. Just get to know each other, even if you're on the opposite ends of the political or religious, perspective, and argue from there. There's also a theory about bullying that I think is helpful, that it's the bystanders that address the problem. It's not calling in the cops, calling in the principal, you giving them medication, it's the bystanders who say, hey, slow it down. I get you, come over here. Let's figure this out a different way. And I think that can happen when extremes, rise to the surface. We saw a little bit of that last time when we met, that people jumped in when, and sort of helped to, tone down the intensity and keep the dialogue going. We can do this if we try. Okay, done.
And before I lose this, sorry,
ahead.
Bobby. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna expound on Helen's and Alice's statement a little bit, and that is that we have to come at this from an objective truth, and we are not being told the truth by the media. If you want to do if you want to learn the truth, turn off your television, use the internet, and find the information yourself. I'll give you a perfect example. At the beginning of the pandemic, I lost my left lung to pneumonia. Okay, that's why I'm smoking cigars now instead of cigarettes. Okay, now it was very important to me personally to find out everything that there was to know about the COVID-19 virus. So I went to the 3M website and I looked at the technical data on their N95 mask, which was supposed to be the best personal protective equipment you could buy, right? It stops microparticles down to 2 microns. Then I went to the CDC website. The coronavirus measures in size from 0.06 to 0.12 microns. So wearing an N95 mask, or even especially one of those stupid cloth masks, is literally like putting up a chain link fence to keep mosquitoes out of your yard. Okay, it doesn't work. And all the news that you get comes from 6 corporations, 6 of the most powerful corporations on the face of the earth. You may think that you're watching MSNBC, you may think that you're watching Fox, but they are getting their talking points from up above. I'm sure you've seen on the internet, you see these little videos where 2 news anchors start saying the same thing, then 4 news anchors start saying the same thing, then it's 16, then it's 32 and 64. Okay, they're ripping the news off the wire. They're not reporters. They are pretty people who know how to speak well and can deliver the truth or the lies to you in a manner in which is pleasing and accepting to you. And people buy it. They don't do any critical thinking anymore. As I said earlier, we had Pentagon funded rebels fighting CIA funded rebels in Syria. Okay. And they were blaming Assad for gassing his own people. When I did my own research as a reporter, I was covering Syria at the time, and it was chemical weapons that had been brought in from Libya after Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama overthrew Libya during the Operation Arab Spring. Okay. That's why Christopher Stevens died. He was facilitating the transfer of these weapons through Turkey into Syria so that they would end up in the hands of al-Nusra and al-Qaeda. Okay, so was Muammar Gaddafi a great guy? No. But since the United States killed his daughter in airstrike after the Berlin bombing in 1993, he'd actually toned his rhetoric down, and he was an active participant by 2001 in the war on terror. His jails were filled with al-Qaeda terrorists, and like I said, I don't like the guy, but he ran Libya well. His one mistake was that he wanted to start buying things with what he called the dinar. It's gold, Libyan gold instead of oil, and that really upset the American petrodollar system. So they had to take him down. All of the countries that were experienced turmoil during the Arab Spring, you know what they'd have in common? Had no central bank. What was the first thing that happened in Libya after the Libyan Transnational Council
So what are you saying,
took
Bobby?
council?
We could- Yeah, what's the meta statement here?
The meta. Okay, I'll get to the point. I'm sorry. I realize that we're short on time. The meta is that the media is lying to you. They've kept Joe Biden's illness a secret for God knows how long, and now all of a sudden they're coming out saying, "Oh, we didn't know. We didn't know." They knew. Anybody with two eyes could see it, and we're being lied to by the media. You got to do your own research. That's my meta.
If I may bring this scope out just a bit, to Helen's point, I think there's something we said about our personal perspectives. Like, we, all of our lives are uniquely different, as Troy had said earlier, and that, we all experience these different things that lead us to look at a problem. Like, we all can look at a singular problem from like 180 degrees of different perspective, just because like we've all been through different things. And being able to sit with people and connect with them on a level that, goes beyond like the knee-jerk reaction, where it's like, if you don't believe as I believe or you don't think as I do, then like obviously there's something wrong with you. And getting past that to the point of like understanding and being able to meet people where they are is incredibly vital. And it's one of those things that in rooms like this, when we're sitting down with purpose to do so, it seems really easy and natural, but out in the real world, it's become almost something of a lost art. And I think that's one of the biggest disconnects that we see.
I want to add two things onto what you just said, Trip and Helen. I like to call it the sticks. I don't live out in a cabin out in the middle of the wilderness. That's just the name I use. I live in a town of 150, 200 people, and we've got 3 little towns. We've probably got 1,000 people. And for those of you in New York City, you're going to laugh at this. There's probably more people in your neighborhood than my entire county. We got 14,000 people in my county. That's it. We got a stoplight that's 50 miles away. So, I have stopped completely watching the news, like I said. So I think, Trip, it goes to your point of, getting away from that. Now, like I said, I scan the headlines. I want to make sure that, the world hasn't blown up overnight while we've been sleeping and we don't know it. But that has been healing for me because, and Bob touched on this, we get wound up in that. It does something in our brain where it just kicks something off when we get wound up in that. And Helen, your point about the West Coast being just basically a mess, I can confirm that for you as far as Seattle goes in the west side of Washington State. Once you get over the Cascades and you get down into Seattle, well, the whole area is Seattle. I just call it all Seattle, but obviously you have a whole stretch there. It all runs together. There are so many homeless people. It is unreal. It's just, I don't know what happened because Seattle used to be a beautiful city and it's just a nightmare. And then you get back over the Cascades and from, there's a little town called Cle Elum all the way to Spokane. Most of it, good portion of it is either farmland or wineries. Like the area that area is where a lot of wheat and soybeans are grown. And we're talking not acres, but miles. And it's very conservative. There's a huge contrast. Like over here, it's not uncommon for us. I don't do it, but you'll see somebody in the store with a pistol in their hip. We don't care. That's how we grew up. I grew up on a farm with God. It doesn't bother us. But if you go to a big city, people might freak out. And I get that because that's that culture. That's what people are used to. That's their perspective. So, Helen, you're right. It's weird. It's just a weird. I think dichotomy is the right word. It's just weird.
I just wanted to say, Troy, that I agree, Bobby. What your meta is basically is that there's a cadre of corporations like BlackRock and individuals who are willing to sell us out that are controlling these horrid things that are now showing themselves up. So, you know, and I do watch the news, but I watch it with a certain mindset. And because I know what the truth is, I can tell whether it's the truth or not. And Troy, in terms of you talking about, I used to live in Corvallis. You know where that is? That's
okay. Yeah.
I used to live in Corvallis.
Oregon, yeah.
And Portland and Seattle, that whole area, I mean, you know, Portland and Seattle were absolutely beautiful cities. Beautiful.
Yeah.
What homeless? You didn't see any homeless people. You
No.
did, you know, and the fact that such beautiful cities have been, even San Francisco, I've been to San Francisco. San Francisco used to be absolutely gorgeous. Now, driving across the Golden Gate Bridge what gave me the willies, but but beautiful, beautiful areas. You know, Malibu, I've seen Malibu, I've been down Pacific Palace, all of that area, you know, and it's just like, what is the impetus for someone to accept money or whatever it is that would cause them to help to destroy their home? You know, it's like, why are you pooping in your house? You know, in a place that's other than your bathroom. Your bathroom is definitely for pooping, but why are you pooping in the living room, in the kitchen, in the bedroom? You're pooping everywhere. Why are you doing that? And so we have to wonder what the real focus is for these individuals. And I will tell you, I've thought about it, and first of all, they're trying to cause us that, if you look at the constitutional law that covered all 50 of our states, that was the unification, e pluribus unum, you know, and one, you know, many one. And what I believe that the individuals and the corporations and, you know, the people that have basically sold us out want to do is to break America up into sizable pieces that can be easily consumed. If you don't have something that will unify you, which is the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and let's go all the way back to the Mayflower Compact. If you don't have something that's going to unify those 50 states, then they'll easily be able to be broken up into consumable pieces. Communist China is basically paying Newsom to help destroy California because Communist China wants California. And that's the reason why, you know.
So I have something to offer up on this, because I think that what we're talking about is that the elites have violated the social contract over and over again in such a way that it's become such like devastating for the masses, basically. With the media being bought by them, of course, we could talk about Sinclair, as we did just a little bit ago, and how like it's all, you know, it's all put out in this idea of a scripted format that, you know, isn't quite the truth. It's a bend of it, because the three companies, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, are the
Yep.
ones that, you know, basically shell company through all of these. And it's every industry. It's not just the media.
Right.
It's healthcare. It's you know, it's, you know, everywhere you look, it's food, it's health, it's all of it. And so they have violated the social contract over and over and over again. And in the meantime, most of the media has been put out in the way to divide us, so that way we think we're each other's enemy instead of what's really going on at hand. And so what we really must do with like dialogues like this and conversations with people is be able to find where they're coming from, because like we've all been part of a propaganda programming, and that is what's really led us to this point of like being at each other's throats. And seeing past that and getting to common ground is really like what's important moving forward.
Absolutely.
Okay, to Tripp's point,
Yeah.
she is exactly right. There is actually United States military doctrine written by, now get this, the high priest of the Temple of Set, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino. Okay. He was written by a Satanist. It's called the strategy of tension. It's used to foment color revolutions. It divides people so that they can't rise up together. It divides them along racial lines, ethnic lines, religious lines, whatever they can use to find a wedge issue. That's where they're going to push it. Okay. Now, conservatives are very angry at the fact that inappropriate reading material is being placed into children's libraries. Okay. That's one way to separate us. Okay. I personally don't have any problem with gay people. I grew up performing in the cast of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, for crying out loud. And and one of my best friends is a gay woman who's married to another gay woman who was artificially inseminated. They're raising a beautiful little girl, and I love them all to death. Okay, but they are conservatives. They're raising their little girl as a little girl. Okay, not one single model of developmental psychology states that a child is aware of their sexual awareness or aware of their sexual self until they reach puberty. They all deny it. But this political agenda is being pushed in to divide us apart. And it was written down in 1981 by the high priest of the Temple of Set, accused child molester from the Presidio scandal, Lieutenant Colonel
1980.
Michael Aquino. 1980? Okay, thank you.
Wow. No. I was talking to myself. I was just saying 1981. Wow, that's how many years ago is that? What are we at? About 30? 30. Trying to do math in
40.
my head quick.
43.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Trip. I can't do math in my head.
Right. And unfortunately, I also see that they want to kill any gray heads, anybody with wisdom or understanding or history of this country. And they want to keep us from talking to or passing wisdom to our grandchildren and our children and our great grandchildren. If they can get rid of, okay, this sounds like a conspiracy, but it's not, it's true. When you take older people and they become fragile and frail, and then you send sick people into the nursing home to be around those individuals who are ill, it's going to wipe them out. In addition to that, they kept their relatives from coming to visit. What kind of foolishness is that? So if there's no history, if there's no personal history being passed on, And if there is no ability to carry it on, then the entities can come in and program younger children to think a different way that is destructive to the society that has been built for them. It might sound weird, but I know what happened in New York because I live right here on the Hudson. And I watched that ship that President Trump sent to Cuomo to help with the individuals sit empty. He
Yeah.
allowed to sit while Cuomo was sending seriously ill people with COVID into nursing homes that killed something like 25,000 medically compromised older people, while their relatives could not come in and visit them. I have a problem with that.
If I could just jump in for a moment, this is John, by the way, and he, the guy who jumped on a moment ago, and he was Troy's conversation partner. And so we had some crossed wires there. This
All
might
my
actually be
fault, all my fault, Matt, sorry.
No, it's all right.
There's John.
I try. Everybody, hi, sorry, I apologize.
This might actually be a fun little exercise. Why don't I let John say a brief introduction, and then if anybody thinks that they can summarize what we're talking about for him, that would
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, I think the fact that we're talking is an accomplishment all on itself.
Todd, you're in Ireland?
Correct, yes.
Oh, baby, there's stuff going on there. I'm not even gonna say.
Tell me all about it. Tell us all about it.
Well, John, you want to say anything about yourself and your experience talking to Troy?
Basically, I am one of those old guys that you were talking about. I think you were alluding to just in the last 2 minutes. So I'm in that category, and I come from a background where basically when it comes to children, the primary role and almost the only role was the responsibility of the parents. Okay, that's a slight exaggeration, but that was pretty much the environment that I grew up in, and the one that seems to exist here in this little island still. And it seems to work. It seems to work, and so on. And talking with Troy, I think one of the things both of us have been very good at is, history is past. And yes, sometimes we should take time out and learn a bit from it. But better use of our time right now is looking at what is the present situation, what is causing whatever might be happening, what is causing the good things right now, and what is bringing about some of the not so good. There was an allusion to it there that we have one incident here in Ireland of a group of protesters that are protesting the conversion of a former paint factory into a residence for about 500 asylum seekers. And that's completely out of touch with the reality in Ireland of the overall population. But as in many countries, we do have a group here, and you might call them something like PPs, as professional protesters. And all they need is something on the internet to say, hey, there's something going on at X place, and guess what? There's swarm there. There will be genuine people among them who are, and I'm not going to go on for any much longer, genuine people among them who are neighbors of this paint factory. And it's not that what they will do is whether it's a cover or not, they'll say, well, our problem really is we weren't consulted, we weren't informed, we weren't educated about what was being planned. So it just goes on like that. But for the most part, I just want to remind, I know your name, Helen, right? I want to say to Helen, that's the only incident of that behavior that's going on in this little island of 5 million people right now.
I've seen some of the things that are happening with that, and there's a connection with why there are so many individuals who are incompatible with the indigenous culture that are being pushed into different areas. Sweden, Italy, the UK, Ireland, Scotland, everywhere, you know, the smaller countries of Europe, they're being overrun with individuals that are totally incompatible with the society that's already there.
See, I would not really buy into that 100%, because Ireland was a place where nobody came to up until almost the year 2000.
Mm-hmm.
There was no reason to come here. There were a lot of good economic reasons,
Mm-hmm.
economic and maybe also some societal, for not being here and for leaving here.
Okay.
And it's a long time since James Joyce wrote about it, but there's a certain amount of that still, that people left this country because it was too insular, it was too dominated by Roman Catholicism or Irish Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
But since 2000, basically, and I know I'm very much aware of it because I drop in here a couple of times a year. I go into a restaurant and it's not an Irish person who's serving me. I go into a shop and I'm probably at the cash register or whatever. It's a non-Irish person. But the country needs the workers, and you know what? Whether they're Polish or Nigerian, and there might be the two dominant groups or the largest groups, they're being assimilated fine, and they're actually and they're recognized for the contributions that they're making and so on.
Not
so,
all.
And I'm not whitewashing. I'm just giving you what my as objective an assessment as I can. Just to go back quickly to Troy, discussion with Troy, I wouldn't say that we've had any real situations where we disagree strongly and got to a point where we couldn't talk about it. Troy and I are two very, very different people. We have a certain amount of common experiences, but we also are very, very different. And I've enjoyed and benefited from the conversations where we both, I would describe us, and as we're open-minded and we're respectful of the other people, the other person's perspective. So to me, that is the key thing of consideration and respect for the other person, whether it's in the behavior or whether it's in speech or what have you.
Well, John, likewise.
If I could make a stab at summarizing where we were when John just was joining us, we had found a common enemy, and it was the corporations, and we were all, yay. And I was thinking of James Lawson, Reverend Lawson, who just recently died, and he named the 4 sources of spiritual wickedness: racism, sexism, violence, and plantation capitalism. So we were all on plantation capitalism right there. So.
You know what amazes me is Bill Gates, okay, or people like him. Those are the people that want to shape the earth in their image, like you were saying earlier. They want to play God. Okay, Bill Gates is not a scientist. He's not a microbiologist. He's not a virologist. He's a computer nerd. But what's he doing? He's engineering these genetically modified mosquitoes,
If I may.
dropping them by the billions over down here in Florida. We just had a drop, and now dengue fever is starting to spring up. So why
Bobby,
do
if I
people
may.
please do. Yeah.
Bill Gates is just the current iteration of Dale Carnegie and Rockefeller. And, there's also Musk and Zuckerberg and all of those as well, that they're just the new, cream of the crop types and, the masters of industry of, this particular century and time. And a lot of it's, digital and technologically based or whatever. But like, it's, like history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it loves to rhyme. And you can see amazing parallels between people that, like Gates and Carnegie and things like that. And so like, but with the wealth of information at our fingertips with technology where it's at now, we have more of a chance than ever to like skip that rhyming and actually do something new for ourselves. So like, it's in conversations like these where we, make common grounds and stuff like that, where we have potential to like move forward in a new direction that may have never been, not necessarily possible, but highly more difficult than it is these days. So,
Does anybody have a solution to? Does anybody have a solution to?
What's going on?
Yeah, we're fighting.
There's
It's like the population has become David, and I agree with Bobby. There's the corporations there. Yeah, this has become like the elites. Does anybody have a solution to how do you overcome this?
Here's the solution.
Make the death penalty great again for lying. The Bible says in Revelation 21:8 that all liars and cowards are gonna burn. Okay, so why don't we just
But Bobby, who administers the death penalty? It's the
Yeah.
state.
I
Who's in
will.
charge of that?
Well, that's one
I
of the-
will. Well, if you tell a purposeful lie with the intention of getting people to do things that they would not normally do, things that are against human nature, things that harm other people, you should be put to death. Okay, because you're influencing millions of people and you're causing a lot of grief. And that's it. Just if we've got to start from the truth, or we're never going to get anywhere.
I wonder if we'll ever get anywhere if we look at someone like Bill Gates and what he is doing and what he has and what he has done. People are accumulating an awful lot of money, and they're not really helping the society, or helping especially the lower echelon of our global society. Someone like a Bill Gates come out, and yes, it's easy to be for us to be on the fence and take pot shots as to what he's doing, but who in the last decade has done more to help the lower echelon of the global society than Bill Gates? Now I'm a little bit biased because for a couple of years, I was in a group where we met with him in a whole different context on a quarterly basis. And my assessment of him then has not changed. He was interested in others, not in himself. Any of the multimillionaires that I happen to read about or happen to encounter in any way, they're very often all focused on themselves. And I can say from my observation, that is not Bill Gates, both of him as a person and of the actions that he's been taking. And I think we run the danger of we're looking for the negative rather than looking for some piece of the positive that we can amplify.
Well, I agree that he has, well, he stole it, but I agree that he's been very helpful in allowing technology to permeate society. But I also think that he's kind of lost his marbles when he talks about cutting down trees. When you talk about cutting down trees, which are necessary for creating oxygen for the life and breath of every living creature on the planet, that says something to me about your actual way of looking at human beings. When you tell me that you need 138 or so thousand acres of farmland that you're going to use a chemical to cover the, I think that his intentions may be good, but I don't think that he really understands what he's saying. I don't think that the man understands what he's saying. I think that now he's not busy building his wealth. He's looking for meaning in his life. And I don't think that he has totally thought through a lot of the things that he's saying.
Here's what I'll add to that. A lot of news articles that come out about that particular gentleman are also heavily laden in biases. And that's something we were talking about earlier with the media being heavily biased, because whether it is all bought and paid for or not, that comes with a certain slant. And so like people like Bill Gates and others have a larger target on their back because, of their notoriety and fame and whatnot. And so a lot gets said about them from a lot of different directions. So I would just say that, media literacy is really important. And, there's definitely a difference in knowing a person and reading about them extensively through other people's perspective.
Well, let me ask you a question about this. Excuse me, Helen. What gives Bill Gates the right to shoot rockets up into the atmosphere, to disperse chalk dust, to control global warming? That affects every single person on the planet. Who elected him to do that?
And I agree with you that there are a lot of perspectives. The thing is, though, Trip, I don't just look at one thing. I look at the spectrum of things. And I've seen things that he has said in meetings regarding, overpopulation on the planet, when that's not really true anyway, because the planet's not overpopulated. Maybe the cities are crowded, but the planet definitely isn't overpopulated. And I just think he's a megalomaniac, like so many people who have gotten to that level of money, and they don't have anything else to do with their lives, and they're trying to find meaning. And so they say and do these things that are harmful to the rest of us. Troy, you asked, what can we do? Well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to resist, and I'm going to teach my grandchildren to resist and my children to resist. And we're going to live a life that is better than that. That's what I'm going to do. Now, if every individual on the planet decides to say, okay, you guys can do whatever you want to do, but this is what my family and I are going to do. I'll give you an example of what happens when people decide that they're going to control those that are elite. And that is the Forbidden City in China was built specifically by the Chinese to control the Han. The Han had conquered China, quote unquote, and the Chinese people, or the higher level families of the Chinese, didn't particularly care for the Han. So they decided that what they would do is build a city for them and put them in that city, and let them think that they had all this power, while the Chinese people went ahead and did what they were going to do. And that's basically what we have to do. We have to kind of put them in a place where they're, whatever they want to rant and rave and say, let them do it. But the rest of us need to live a life that is more compatible with our humanity and our ability to, just find joy in life, because a lot of these things are not about joy. They really aren't.
I want to take this just to one more place real quick, because I think that we've danced around the idea of, it takes a village to raise a child, and that kind of theme. Like it's important that when we exist in society, like we're connected in community with each other. And like that's sort of been lost. And like it's definitely something that in my work going forward, I'm trying to produce like a community event that is travelable. And so it'll go from like town to town and actually like help foster community connections, like, and grow some community bonds. And so in that respect, like it's the small villages that we can produce with ourselves, our neighbors, our families, that kind of thing. And like the bonds that we can do will not only like turn the tides of like what we're talking about here, but like in case anything happens, you know, the proverbial shit hitting the fan, we'll have those community bonds will like help put us back into right a lot quicker than like if we atomize and individualize and like, you know, just distill it down to like us and our families and that's it. So like, you know, community is really important.
I want to add to what you're saying there, Trip. And this is hearsay, okay? This is not proven that I have read, but this is what I heard. It's what I watched. I watch a lot of Joe Rogan's podcast because he's got, you name it, everybody and their dog is on there. And so I love watching his show and his podcast because you never know who he's going to have on, what you're going to learn. Okay. He reads a lot of history and he was talking about the fact that when you have smaller groups and smaller communities, 100 to 200 people, those types of smaller communities actually operate way better because everybody knows everybody and they all work together. But once you get outside of that number, it kind of falls apart. And Alice, you might know this better, given your profession, the way we all think as human beings, it kind of falls apart because then it gets too large. I don't know if anybody else has heard that.
Actually, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's because after a certain amount of people, 150 to 200, not everybody can know everybody, and so it gives that that wedge for speculation and division, and that's where it starts crumbling.
Okay.
Full disclosure, if I could, I would seduce and marry Bill Gates. Here's the reason. Doing this without fame and money, I communicate, I'm just this nice little old lady who thinks that talking pretty will make people, you know, live happily ever after. Aren't you sweet? Go away. If I had someone with money and power who said, this is something important, it would become something important. There would be a grassroots movement. There would be social media, you know, influencers. There would be a very expensive app that would have all sorts of attractive bells and whistles. There would be, you know, TV commercials, and you know, and it would go somewhere. Now, there's a problem here, but I'm sharing my fantasy in the hopes that maybe we could do something with it.
Just swipe right. I don't know. But yeah, that's a good idea. Find somebody that's got a lot of money and co-opt them. And
you know,
yeah,
you should continue to want to be the sweet lady that you are, and you know, we'll figure it out. I mean,
the idea is that
you know, there's a multiplicity of the way that you would get it out there, and we don't need the powerful or the money to do it.
Well, power and people with power and money are human beings like everybody else. They just happen to have fallen into that kind of life. You know, and that's, I think of them as just as human and just as flawed as the rest of us are. And they happen to have the burden and the gift of being able to having this resource to, you know, you want to build a spaceship and send it to Mars, go for it. You know, I don't know. You want to buy Twitter and call it X? Okay. You know, they're just as human as everybody else. They're just playing with bigger toys.
Yes, but we're not.
well, that's right. And the problem with generational wealth is that along with it comes inbreeding. Okay. and oh, you think I'm joking? I'm not. All of the kings and queens of Europe are related by blood.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why hemophilia is prominent among the ruling families of Russia and Europe, because they're all related. And that's,
Yeah.
you have generational wealth, you're gonna get inbreeding.
Yeah, well,
So-
you know,
If
when,
I can go, if I could go back, Helen, to you for one moment
yes,
on the population, because I think mathematically what you said about we not being overpopulated. I come from a position of, I think the root cause of our climate problems is population. But having said that, the thing about it is there's certainly an awful lot of room in this globe for a lot more people than we have.
exactly.
Okay, the only problem is there isn't any more room for people of the type that we are. Our behavior is such, it is so destructive to the environment that every time we increase that number, it's worse and worse. So for us to increase the population, if there was any good reason for doing that, I would suggest that basically we'd have to examine ourselves, examine our behaviors, and say, how can we accommodate greater numbers?
Oh, okay. But John, I have to say this. This planet has been in existence long before we got to it. It breathes in and out. We are finite. When we go away from here, it's continuing to go on. It knows how to clean itself. That's the way the cycle was set up. Climate change is a big bunch of hooey. The only thing it is, it's not climate change. It's called weather. We've had extremes in weather since the beginning of the planet. We're going to have extremes in weather at the end of the planet. The thing breathes. One human being or a segment of human beings is not going to make that much of a difference to this huge globe that actually breathes in and breathes out. It knows how to correct itself.
Helen, while I can meet you there, there's also a giant island of plastic in the ocean that we ourselves put there. And so it's issues like that and the acidification that is really leading to these problems. And that is human caused.
Okay, but the thing is, it's not the whole ocean that's covered. And since it's not the whole ocean that's covered, and we know how to create things that will help us clean up the ocean. See, I don't feel too guilty about climate change, and I'll tell you why. I came from a generation where we actually used paper bags over and over and over again. We used glass bottles over and over and over again. And
We need to get back to that.
the cell
That's right.
phone that
Yeah.
I have is actually falling apart because I don't stand in line every time a new cell phone comes out.
Mm.
I think that sometimes we are actually hypocrites when we talk about how the environment is so terrible, and yet there are kids in the Congo that are digging and getting sick for the cell phone that we use. Come on, people. I'm sorry. The planet can take care of itself. It
Well,
always.
again, I want to point back to like personal perspectives because a lot of people in America weren't privy to that idea of what was going on in the Congo until after a certain timeline when and people are learning about that in real time. And I know that it has changed behaviors on like a smaller scale, but like on the global outreach, like more is needed to be done. Like we all need to consciously like realize that the rare earth metals don't come for free, that they come at a drastic cost. And like that is something that the knowledge is gaining power and momentum as people like learn. I know that besides cell phones, there's also things like vapes and things like that are like really big proponents of these rare earth metals. And so people learning the knowledge of like what the actual cost is on the back end can change it for some of them. Not everybody's willing to be that empathetic and change their behaviors around it, but like there's a consciousness because perspective, like people don't know what they don't know. And so for a lot of these behaviors and stuff that we've been learned as like creature comforts because everybody does it, we don't really understand how damaging it is on the back end because like that particular bit of knowledge has either been kept from us from the corporations again who stand to profit from those things, or it's something that in some aspects it's too horrible for the collective to really think about. And so we like there's that partition that can come up and be like, well, it's just how the way things are. And like that's probably one of the most toxic things that can ever be. It's just the way things are. Like that's that to me is something that needs changing.
But we're not teaching people to think. We're not teaching, that's not the aim of education. For me, when I was in school, when I had the opportunity to learn, even in segregated South, it was a demand that I actually think, that I read Dostoevsky in addition to reading Richard Wright, in addition to reading the Bible, in addition, I learned how to write, I learned how to read, I learned how to think. That's not necessarily the point of education at this point in time, because it's more indoctrination. There is an attempt to create generations of docile, weak human beings. I believe that the book 1984 is unfortunately coming to pass because there are too many people that don't want to think. It is difficult for them to think. I am a member of the so-called Black community, and believe me, getting Black folks to think outside of the slave mentality they've been told that they have inherited is the hardest thing on the planet. I can talk to you guys, them, I can't talk to. Isn't that a shame? But that's the way it is. I cannot talk to them. Why? Because they, oh, you sound like a white person. Well, what does a white person sound like? What's that supposed to sound? Does that mean that my brain, my ability to use my thoughts and my understanding to navigate the planet, there's something inherently white about it? Okay, you guys have lost it. That's what I have to tell them. And that's the reason why my circle of friends is like, that's that.
Helen, in the community that you talk of, do you see any change in the very young generation? In other words, the youngest stratum of your friends, are they changing any, or do they still have that same mentality that you're referring to?
My children, my grandchildren, and hopefully my great-grandchildren and their friends actually think outside of that, but that's because we have a certain faith foundation, and that it makes a big difference. It makes a huge difference. Our understanding of how the world works. They've traveled, they've, you know, they're so outside the box. When I look at my kids, I'm like, you're so outside the box. You're so much more than what I was. My grandchildren are so much more than what I was, and so much more traveled and so intelligent on that level. And the people that they deal with are on a whole different level than even my parents. They're able to see things in a way that's more on the level of plain old, just the foundation of being human. And that's the foundation that we have to get to. We're human, we're flawed. As you know, as you said, Trip, we're flawed, all of us, you know, regardless of the amount of money that we have or the amount of influence that we have, we're all flawed. And the problem that a lot of us have is that we don't want to admit that we're flawed. Once we admit that we're flawed and there's work that needs to be done on the individual, I'm not trying to change everybody. It's hard enough to change my stubborn behind. I am not the easiest person to make a change, but I have to change. So I'm not out here trying to, I understand we want other people to understand their worth, but they also have to be willing to change their mind. And that's where it all starts. If they don't want to change their mind, we can't force them to change their mind. And only their experience is going to make it necessary for them to change.
Can Alice help anyone to change their minds? Alice, we'll have to rely on you and your colleagues.
No, I'm not, I don't think anyone should change their minds. Just look at the world from a different perspective at the same time and solve problems from there. Because as I listen to all of you, you all make sense. even those who are coming from different perspectives, even on climate change, reality, facts. I mean, I think of psychic reality as being a kind of fact that needs to be looked at. Because if a person believes something with every ounce of their being, that's real to them. And you have to sort of honor that if you're going to try to work with it or change it or adapt to it. Because, if they believe something, they're going to act on that belief.
Well,
And if they know that's wrong, so what? We have to honor each other's psychic reality and change it if you can change it, if it's wrong, if it's in some way malleable, or adapt to it, or just look at multiple perspectives. There's
well,
much, I think, that could be done by just honoring multiple perspectives on these problems.
and that's
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but some perspectives just don't need to be honored. Okay. We're talking culture. I've noticed a common thread through this, through pollution and everything else. We're talking culture. The plastic, sea of plastic out in the Great Pacific Gyre, that's not coming from the United States. That's coming from Southeast Asia. It's coming from China, where they dump their garbage right into the rivers and it empties out into the ocean. Their culture needs to be changed. The child slaves in Africa that are mining the rare earth metals, okay, that needs to be changed. After Gaddafi was overthrown, the Al-Qaeda and al-Nusra terrorists that overtook the government, well, they're selling sub-Saharan African workers as slaves right now, $400 a piece.
Yep.
Okay, that's got to change. In the United States, rap music. I started my career in broadcasting as a disc jockey. Okay, I know my rap music. It changed when gangster rap started coming in, and it was all F the police and black men calling each other the N-word and calling their women hoes. And this is what's being foisted upon the black community as entertainment, as music. And what it does is, if you call somebody a disparaging name over and over and over again, they're going to come to believe it.
Yeah.
So when when black individuals just use the N-word willy-nilly, I mean, absolutely no expense, they are participating in their own demise. Okay, they need to respect each other. They don't need to call their women hoes. I can call them queens. I'm good with that. But dang, this is all being done again by these multinational corporations that want to keep us divided. The rap lyrics are a psychological weapon.
Yes.
Okay.
So we've basically in America been victims of psyops for a long time, not just the Black community, but the nation, especially in the last, I'd say 8 years, we've become a psyop operation. And unfortunately, what it takes, it's like, Bobby, I have to say this. Your neighborhood does not have to be flooded with drugs if you refuse to sell. You didn't have to do it, but you did. So, and I'm gonna say I used to sell them. So at some point in time, you have to come to an understanding that A, you need forgiveness for doing that because you were destroying other people's lives. And B, you don't have to do that. You can actually go out and find a way to make money, to live, and to support your family without breaking the law. You can do that. It's a decision. People believe what they are not willing to think through. And as I said, people not wanting to admit that they're the ones at fault because they have choice. Free will is there. We talked about that, Matt. Everybody has free will. You don't have to do anything. So anyone who does a certain thing because they feel like they're downtrodden or whatever, that's on them. They have to come to an understanding of their value as a human being. And I can't convince them of that. Alice, you were saying that, you know, their experience. Everybody talks about, well, there's, you know, everybody has their own truth. I don't think that that's true. I think that truth is one. There's just one truth. But like a mountain, everybody might be going up a different pathway up the mountain. That's called an experience. It's not the truth. It's just their experience of the truth.
Right.
So
I didn't mean to say there are multiple truths. It was more that psychic reality, you know, it is a kind of truth that we have to honor if we're going to look for a larger truth or come together around it. Because different people have a delusion is an absolute conviction. And you better honor that person's delusion because they're going to act on it. That doesn't mean you can't change it or medicate it or try to keep it under control or, you know, set limits around it. But you can't make it go away by saying it's, you know, I'm going to cancel you, you're bad.
Well, that's true. I mean, you know, it's like the question then becomes, if someone is having psychosis, and I know that what they're having a psychosis about is harmful to them, and it isn't reality, because there's reality and then there's your experience in the reality. Do I agree with their psychosis? And I would have to say I can't agree with their psychosis, or that will make me psychotic.
Yeah, it happens sometimes.
Like a virus. It's like,
Yeah, don't stare into the abyss for too long, or the abyss is going to start staring back at you.
But what I will do is, you know, I will sit down and I will say, if that's what you believe, I don't believe that. You can't make me believe that. And it doesn't change my respect for you as a human being, but you cannot force me.
Yeah, I'll tell you, a lot of my paranoid patients were thrilled in recent years because they got to say, I told you so. The FBI and CIA are to get you, and the media is bugging you and telling you what to do.
Oh my gosh, they literally are.
Okay.
Last time I went to Washington, D.C. to testify in a trial, I'd learned by that time that I couldn't take a lighter into a federal courthouse, right? So I dumped it in, I put it in the flower pot right outside the hotel where I was staying. I went to testify, came back, every flower in that flower pot was torn out. They were watching every move that I made. They probably thought I was making a dead drop for Russians or something. These the FBI and the CIA are.
We've got
joke.
Matt, if I can interject something for
okay,
a minute.
we've got to wrap up. Just John, if you wanted to say something, and Lynn, was there something you wanted to say a while back?
I wanted to, I think everybody else heard Alice say this clearly, but I did not. And I just wanted to clarify, back when, a few minutes ago, did you say that, you know, if you had money and power and so on, you would create a whole bunch of these small group communities for dialogue? Was that the point you were making?
I would make it have more potency, because some, you know, rich, famous journalist or you know, would validate it.
Okay.
And it would go from being just random people talking to being a new safe space to, you know, say the quiet parts out loud. And you know, listen to each other and solve problems together as a community, and that there's potency in here. And somehow the idea of having validation from that type of person, I don't like the idea, but it seems like it's something to think about as a thought experiment, that if we got somebody to say, I'm going to fund, you know, 1,000 of these, and I'm going to write about it, and it would somehow become something people would want.
That
I
was
think
kind
that's
of
being
my,
done quite a bit. I think A Million Conversations does that. Resetting the Table does that. David Brooks with the Weavers tries to do that.
That's the problem. It's
Yeah.
doing it, but it's not doing it. It's not
Right.
catch hold.
Yeah. Right.
It's,
Not
you know,
potent.
Are you sure are you
it's not,
sure?
there's no traction. It's not going viral in a way that actually makes a difference in the polarization that
But-
we're seeing in our society. So
I-
that's
That's not necessarily true. I think that it increments, it does make a difference. It might not happen like all of a sudden, but this ship has been going for a minute. And this is a big ship.
Yeah, yeah.
And the rudder, when you turn that rudder, it takes a long time, but it does change direction.
Yep.
So I think that you should encourage yourself and be encouraged that there is change that is happening. It may not necessarily be as drastic as you want it to be, but it's happening. It
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
happening. If nothing else, but the 9 of us that are sitting here, that is 9, right? 3, 6, 9. Okay. So because new math, I don't know. But the 9 of us sitting
If you
here,
want to call it 8, it's okay. Whatever you prefer.
yeah, we're all sitting here, and even in the conversations that have gone on, been a necessity for us to engage in thinking in that process. So it is happening. It may not be happening on the level that you want it to, or in the speed that you want it to, but it's happening. And so, what is it? Slow and easy? I forget it.
slow and steady.
So State wins the race.
Yes, the race. And that, it doesn't necessarily have to be. Why are you sitting there talking to somebody Trip? I saw that.
Helen, I have a question. Actually,
We
this
gotta
is for
end. We gotta end. We're out of time. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We can email and if we want to set up another meeting, we can do that.
Okay,
All right.
Yeah.
that would be
I'd
good.
love to do it. This was a great way to spend an hour.
Troy,
Yeah.
Whatever we did. So,
Can Troy put his question for me in the chat so I can see what it is?
Why don't well look, if whoever wants to sign off now, adios. If whoever wants to stick around, stick around.
Okay.
Okay. I just wanted to throw something quick out to really everybody.
Mhm.
And Helen, please excuse if I'm being stereotypical, okay?
Yeah.
I don't mean to be
Okay.
at all.
Okay.
I really don't. I'm just a white guy, grew up on a farm and I'm not familiar with the Black community. I'm going to put it that way. So if I'm stereotyping something, please correct me. But I think this goes for everybody. I've always had the impression that, let me rephrase this. Helen, you might be able to answer this better, that if this happens more in the Black community.
Mhm.
There was a day, now I was young, little, but I remember people would sit out on their front porch, back porch, have a beer, talk to their neighbor. I don't know why it popped in my head. I was just thinking that the Black community used to do that more, or they would get together. I don't know why I have that in my head.
You're right.
But-
You're
But you know what? I remember my dad doing that. I remember my grandfather doing that. I remember different people in my family doing that, and we're all white as snow. So I'm probably thinking of something completely different. But one, does that still happen? Two, does anybody know if that still happens in the white community? And I guess as a whole, because I don't mean to single you out, Helen. It's just I have that in my head that that was a common thing, and I don't know why it's in my head. But I would think that what you're getting at, Alice, with getting this larger, with doing this, getting it larger, I would think that this is what we need more of. We need to put our phones down, turn the TV off, turn the internet off, get out on your back porch, you know, start talking again. Bobby, I enjoy a cigar every now and then. Sit on your back porch, talk to your neighbor, have a cigar. Just do these things, and I would hope it's going to take time, like you said, Ellen. It's a big ship. I would hope that that would kind of start to turn things around. I don't know if I'm way off base here because
You're not.
I don't know if there's such a thing as an ADD, but my brain goes 10,000 miles an hour, and I try to put everything together.
Yeah, I do too. It's okay. It's
Okay.
It just goes.
let me
So,
say it like this. No, you're not off base. Yet
okay.
we still do that.
Okay.
We don't do it in the cities all the time. John, thank
Okay.
you. We don't do it in the city
Bye, John.
all the time.
Hi, John.
See
but
you all.
There are
Okay.
Have to go.
Okay. See ya. I'll
Bye.
email you. We can talk next.
Where did Helen go? Oh, there you go.
Oh, I'm still.
Yeah.
She's there.
Yeah, I like to run off of the mouth, Alice, you know that. But Troy, it still happens. People still sit on their porches or in their yards. People still know their neighbors. Guess what?
Yes.
People that are in the cities, they too actually do it. In certain neighborhoods, you will go down the street, like in Brooklyn. If I go down the street in Brooklyn, certain parts of Brooklyn, people are sitting on their stoops and they're saying hello. And what you see of humanity on the news, as Tripp was saying, you can't always take that at face value.
No. Yeah.
As human beings are not doing so bad.
No. Yeah. I agree.
There's
Yeah.
a
I think there's a large difference between rural culture and city-fied folks too. I've experienced both. I grew up baling hay on my grandma's farm down in southern Indiana. I was rapping and scratching records on 8 Mile when Marshall Mathers was still in diapers. Okay, so I've experienced the best of both worlds, and people in a rural area are much more chill. They really are. Cities bring tension. They do, and people tend to separate themselves into enclaves. Detroit, for example, you've got Hamtramck and Southfield and all these others, and it's all part of like Metro Detroit, but people of similar backgrounds, similar ethnic backgrounds, tend to gather in the same spot. Like Hamtramck, for instance, used to be strictly Polish. They had 100-year-old Polish bars there that I would frequent when I was going to college, and now it's 100% Muslim. Okay, so people tend to gravitate towards their own people, and I get that. I understand it. I do it myself. But here's the thing. We are all God's people. We are, what doesn't matter what our religion is, doesn't matter what our skin color is. It doesn't matter even if we don't believe in him. We are all his children and we are all equally valuable. But of course, if you ask my Marine Corps drill instructor, he would have said we were all equally worthless. But in any point, we are all equal. Okay, it's just culture, the things that we are being taught by people that do not have our best interests in mind,
right.
that is keeping us separate.
And that's true. I mean, So Troy, yeah, we still do it. We still, find a nice ripe watermelon and sit down and pop it open on we do that.
Yeah, okay, because I was like, okay, am I going to be out of line the way I'm saying this? Because for some reason that was just stuck in my head. And I don't know why.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to present it that way. It's just, I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know.
I think about times when I sat on the porch with my grandmother and my mother, and we had bushels of beans that we would actually sit there and snap, and they would be having a conversation. Now, as a child, I was not allowed to speak, but I did a lot of listening, and
Okay.
you learn your family
Okay.
stories and, things about folks in the neighborhood whose house not to go to, and, those kind of things. So yeah, we do that.
Okay.
It's still normal, but that's part of American culture that I really don't want to ever lose. That's a part of our culture as Americans that I don't know how other people in other countries do it, but that's us. That's how we do it. And I know John was saying that, he didn't feel that, these individuals were bringing chaos to countries. And I'm looking at who they're putting where, who they're allowing to come to certain countries and their conduct. These are people who are 1,400 years behind everybody else. That are there. Our infrastructure, the American infrastructure is they're trying to kill it, but it was one of the greatest infrastructures on the planet. We had the educational system set up, we had the manufacturing set up, we had the medical set up, we had libraries. This country has more libraries and public libraries in all types of communities where everybody is primarily literate in this country. We were primarily literate. There was no other country that had as huge a population of literate individuals in a free educational system. Everybody else had to pay. Africa they got to pay. India, they got to pay. Certain areas in Europe, you got to pay. But here, everybody was guaranteed 12 years of free education to learn to be literate and get the basics in reading, writing, and arithmetic. That created a population that was very the ingenuity that came out of us. We were manufacturing at a crazy rate. We were inventing stuff. I don't care who gets the glory for it. We were inventing things. We were developing this nation. We were doing stuff in this nation that, wow, look at India. If you look at India, you would think that as much money as is in the Maharajas and hands, that they would have indoor plumbing, that they would have a plumbing system. They don't. They don't. How is it that you're still walking through portions of India and you're walking over open sewage?
Well, it's the same way in San Francisco right now.
Well, but it wasn't like, but I'm just saying, I know what you're saying, but I'm just saying that it was not like that. We had I don't get it.
Is there any way of pulling this together? Because we could go on all day, but we do need to put some closure to this. Hunter, do you have any thoughts about what you've been hearing? Just witnessing this.
I'm just like, ooh.
I just thought it took an interesting direction because you can kind of see that path that we were talking, or not we, but you guys were talking about, like going from how we interpret the world around us with media to here's some of the things that have been affected because of that into other problems that we see today stemming from like corporations and just, I don't know, it's like it stacks on top of each other. And I thought that was quite interesting. And yeah, I was trying to think really meta with it all. So
Okay,
Well, if I can leave everybody with two thoughts, it would be two things that I live my life by. There are about 8 to 9 billion people on this planet. If every single person put the interests of their neighbors, the other 8 billion, ahead of themselves, then they would have 8 to 9 billion people looking after them.
Yeah.
Okay. Nobody thinks about that. And number two, Bobby's maxim: never underestimate the ability of human beings to amaze and or disappoint you. So
yeah.
so that's what I've got. I really enjoyed my time with you
Thank you.
today, guys.
Yeah.
And thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thanks
Thank
so
you
This
much.
was
all.
fun.